We are back live here on the One Day, One Delt Day of Giving 2022. So far, so good. Looking over at our totals, 76 total gifts thus far, amassing over $28,521. Thank you all so much for your generosity thus far. We've received word that the Delt Pride match has been met. So thank you to Tom Pitchford for putting that out there and getting people excited about giving back to Delt Pride. And thank you to all Delts wherever dispersed for rising up and meeting that challenge for our brothers in the LGBTQ community. I'm joined now by our Director of Undergraduate Education, Alex Kennedy. Alex, how are you today?
I'm good, Vince. How are you?
I am well. Alex, tell us a little bit about what the Director of Undergraduate Education does and a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, so my name's Alex. I've been on staff since June of 2020. And in my work, I do just what my title says. I'm in charge of undergraduate education. And we in our team kind of think of it as more than just, a course or a program or an experience. We think about it through the life of the undergraduate experience where they're learning in experiential learning opportunities like that. So I'm responsible for all of our educational strategy and the execution of any education for our undergraduate members. And so that happens in a variety of places. You might be familiar with Ignite, our emerging leader program, or PresEx, the President's Excellence Institute. That will be discussed a little bit later today by my colleague, Jacob. But I oversee specific areas around programming and education at two large events you might have heard of, Carnia and Division Conferences, and then also kind of oversee general member education that's accessible currently via our online learning management system, Aspire. So I manage all of those different moving pieces and also work to develop more officer education, largely finding opportunities for our undergraduates to learn and try things and sometimes fail and sometimes scuff their knees, but get back up and try again. So
Very exciting. We know that there's a Carnia upcoming.
There is.
We'll be in Norfolk this August. Alex, what are some things from an educational standpoint that students and alumni can look forward to in Norfolk this summer?
Yeah, so what's really cool about the Carnia experience is it's super intergenerational, right? But when we think about from an education lens, that can sometimes be difficult because what we might be wanting to talk to with, a college junior who's chapter president and is thinking about, I need to go out into the professional world after this, might look a little differently than the conversation we might have with the 70-year-old, well-seasoned member of the organization. And so our goal this year with Carnia programming is to officially roll out and unveil our new member education and experience framework that we're calling the Life of Excellence. So the Life of Excellence has four main components. And those are personal leadership development. So some of those things include identity, my own leadership capacity, better knowing myself, professional development, which is a lot of that career readiness and preparedness. There's also wellness and well-being, which you'll all hear a little bit more about later from my colleague, Kelly, who has been doing a phenomenal job in her new role as coordinator of wellness and well-being. And then there's also strengthening community, which is the concepts around how do you create community in various different ways. And so the Carnia programming is rooted in those areas, but it specifically is designed to be intergenerational. So we want that 70-year-old seasoned volunteer member to be sitting in the same session as that 18-year-old, 19-year-old having these conversations, because the fraternity is the avenue that they can have those in a way that's not available elsewhere. And we'll also do some really great programming. We'll have some really great keynotes. Andy Longo, my supervisor, will be on later, also talking some more about some of those Carnia programs. But we'll also do some stuff around the membership impact study. And that's what I'm really excited for, because what we're actually going to do is we're going to do less speaking to everyone and more showing and modeling how they can take the information and come back to their chapter. So one of the main components, I get really excited about this, is the concept of belonging. So the data shows if our members feel like they belong, their net promoter score or the way they would recommend the fraternity to others just skyrockets. It's directly related to each other. And so we're going to do some activities at Carnia for our chapters who may have struggles with belonging according to their report. We're going to provide them some activities they could take and do with their chapter to start conversations around those things. And what really gets me excited about that is it might seem like that's more chapter oriented, but a lot of those skills are soft skills that we're being told continuously are missing in the workforce. And so there's a lot of different Carnia programming happening, a lot of really great conversations around what it means to be a 21st century Delt. And I'm really excited for the Carnia programming and really excited for some of our featured speakers who are going to be joining us.
That's incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, you talk a lot about soft skills. You talk a lot about things that that
Yeah.
aren't very Delt specific, right?
Yeah.
I think with a lot of these conferences, we're used to talking about treasurer track and things that are very applicable to very specifically the Delt experience.
Yeah.
It seems like there's been a shift, not necessarily away from that, but pivoting towards more holistic development.
Yeah.
Have you seen that there's been a need from students for this? What has been the impetus behind driving programming and content in this direction?
Yeah, so I would say a general need from a variety of different stakeholders. From our undergraduates themselves, they know and they're being told these things are required and expected of them when they join the workforce. Critical thinking, communication skills, the ability to deal with ambiguity, which nobody really especially likes, but like that's a skill that you've got to hone. And so we're really focusing on it from a needs perspective. So what are the need we're going to meet for our members? And we hear that that's also backed up by a bunch of data. And so in the MIS, we show that our undergraduates really are worried about securing that first job outside of college, which I'm sure, Vince, were you scared to get your first job out of college? I was terrified I wasn't going to get one. And so there's that data that shows that. There's a lot of data that shows from HR folks. So like the Society of Human Resource Management has a lot of really great data that basically shows these critical skills are missing, and instantaneously you notice that they're all soft skills. And so our focus, instead of saying, okay, to your point about treasurer training, instead of saying, well, sit on down, we're going to show you the operating system, this is how you balance the checkbook, this is how you do all of these things. Instead, we're focusing more on the skills necessary to successfully execute that job that are soft skills. So for a director of finance, that would be the ability to hold people accountable, to have informal accountability, right? So like, hey, Vince, you haven't paid your bill yet. That's a different skill set than, well, check. I submitted a check-in.
Sure.
And so we're really focusing more on that, with the hope being that we educate our members more on that, because we can create online, easy, just-in-time resources for our members to understand how to log into our systems, pay bills, etc. The fraternity creates this really great ecosystem for them to execute and try soft skill development in a place where it's kind of a safe place to land if they fall. And so a lot of that education is also the things that people are asking for our undergraduates to have. And so our hope is that we can both meet the need our undergraduates have identified, and folks who are hiring, recent college grads will also notice.
That's incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
So I know one thing that a lot of undergrads and alumni are anxious to hear about are the upcoming changes with division conferences. We heard a lot about it at this year's conferences. Yeah. What should we expect in 2023 and moving forward?
Yeah. So as you know, most years over the last few decades of the fraternity have focused mostly around officer education. And just like I just mentioned, we're kind of taking officer education out of the in-person experience around tactical, logistical parts of the job and moving that to Aspire or in other avenues for education. And so the division conference model has been a long time coming. There's been a staff and volunteer committee that's worked on this over my full time on staff and even prior to that. And so what we're doing is we're shifting from officer education to personal leadership development programming. And all of this is rooted in the concepts of the theory of emotional intelligence, which is basically to lead others and to live a successful, plentiful life, you need to better understand and know yourself. And so at division conferences, it's a little shorter because we want our students to be able to go to class and not miss class.
Sure.
But it's all about them. And so in the past, if you wanted to go to a division conference, you needed to be an officer, or maybe you were that overachiever. But now we want as many men to come to division conference as possible, because the way we've designed it is you can come year after year, and it'll be a similar but different experience. We really find the people who'd most benefit from going to, a national event aren't the ones who sometimes get to make it to one. And so we really want to create, open the floodgates, let more men experience some really great programming from Delt, and to do so in a wonderful and great environment full of their brothers. So the programming is rooted, like I said, in personal leadership development, but it will focus on all four pillar domains of the life of excellence. And so there will be some stuff around how do you take care of yourself in the wellness and well-being? And then how do you take care of others? How do you advocate for them in strengthening community? How do you talk about what you learned in Delt and the experiences you had when you're sitting at your first job interview? Like, I didn't really know what I was doing the first time I sat in my first interview trying to explain my sorority experience.
Sure.
And then also didn't necessarily have the language to explain more about who I was. And so our hope is that this programming will allow our undergraduates an opportunity to like peer inside themselves a little bit more and also have fun, because we want our members to have fun when they come to our events.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Finally, I know you've touched a little bit on this, but wanted to give you a platform for any last statements as to where have these changes come from, and why are they going to be so important and influential over programming and education moving forward?
Yeah. So one of our new team members, Kelly Fox, our coordinator of wellness and well-being, was brought on explicitly because our team believes that the wellness and well-being of our members is paramount, it's most important. And part of being well, emotionally, physically, socially, all of the different dimensions of wellness, is to know yourself. And in many ways, a lot of what our society is talking around right now around masculinity is coming more from a deficit lens of like, don't do this, don't do that. Men shouldn't, men should not. And like, instead, we want to focus on men have this capacity. You can do these things. And I think that's really important because men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women are. And that the statistics grow even more staggering and sad when you look at men who have different identities. So queer men or Black and brown men, lots of different statistics are saddening. And our belief as part of that is like, we can contribute to positively lowering that statistic. We want to see less male suicide. And we specifically want our men to be able to better understand themselves, to identify their emotions and their feelings and their thoughts, to be able to go out and more successfully navigate the complexity of the world. So yeah, so all of it is based around that, our desire for our members to live beautiful and wonderful lives. And to do that, we want to help educate them more on who they are. So we don't have the answers. We just kind of have the process for them to guide for their own life of excellence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can't say enough how much I appreciate that and think it's so easy to get behind that. And I hope, and I tend to think that our alumni and our membership will as well. And so with that, we want to thank Alex for joining us here today.
Thanks,
we want to let everyone know that there's opportunities here today during Day of Giving to support these critical initiatives in helping these men discover their best selves and to feel emotionally, socially, and intelligently competent as they transition through their Delt experience into the rest of their lives. So we're talking about underneath the categories on deltsgive.org today, the leadership and educational programming block of donation options. And so that supports PresX, the New Chapters and Colonies Fund, the Undergraduate Academies Fund, fellowships for conferences and carnias, so that men that may not immediately have the resources, or chapters either getting their footing under them as new chapters, or chapters that are going through a tough financial period for whatever reason, still have the resources to send men who are really yearning for these opportunities to experience this potentially at times life-saving content and life-changing sort of educational experiences. And beyond that, we also want to put a special plug out there for the Paul Fachenbach educational programming support programs and scholarship as well. That's an opportunity for undergraduates, just again, to have funds to be able to take advantage of these awesome programs. And so with that, we'll lead off into the next hour. We are currently sitting still, 76 gifts, about $28,000 raised. As Alex said, we'll have Kelly Fox on in just a little bit, our coordinator for wellness and well-being. Stay tuned here. Every hour, we'll have updates here on the 2022 Delt Day of Giving.